In the last section, we finished up all of our different reducers. So we now have 3 action creators and 3 reducers. Something that's really important to note at this point in time is that we have not made a single reference to the Redux library whatsoever. So the vast amount of code that we're going to write with Redux is going to be just normal code, normal functions, normal arrays and objects that you and I write. Only at very small, very specific points in time are we going to even think about referencing the Redux library directly. Now that we've put all of our action creators and reducers together, we're going to wire them all together into a single object called a store. A store in Redux is essentially the assembly of a collection of different reducers and action creators. So, at the bottom of this file, I'm going to take the Redux library. Remember that we already added Redux into this CodePen project a little bit ago. So if you do a console log of Redux, you'll see that we've got the Redux library right here. We're going to pull off 2 specific functions from the library called create store and combine reducers. And that's going to come from Redux. So now to wire together all of our reducers, we're going to use this combine reducers function. I'll tell you exactly what that thing is doing in just a minute. So I'm going to say const our departments. So this is essentially the combination of all of our different departments or all of our different reducers put together. And that's going to be the result of calling combine reducers and passing in an object with a couple of different key value properties. To this object, we're going to pass in each of our different reducers. So I'm going to say accounting is accounting. Claims history is claims history, and our policies is our policies. Now, each of these variables right here are the names of our different reducers that we just put together. So there's policies, accounting, and claims history. Now that we've combined all of our reducers together, we're going to use the other function from Redux called create store. So underneath that, I'll say const store is create store, and I'll pass in our departments. And now we have this magical store object. The store object represents our entire Redux application. It contains references to all of our different reducers and to all of our state produced by those reducers, so all the data produced by those reducers as well. The store object has a couple of different functions on it that are going to be very useful for what we're trying to do. One of the functions on here is the dispatch function. This dispatch function right here is just like that original form receiver that we had spoken about. So we want to pass the dispatch function an action. When we send it an action, which is just like our form, the dispatch is going to make a copy of it and then send it off to each of the different reducers inside of our application. Just as in the analogy, we had said that the form was passed to a form receiver, and the form receiver put it on a copier and then passed copies of that form to each of the different departments. So in order to call dispatch, we first have to pass in an action that is created by an action creator. So let's first create an action by calling an action creator, and then we can pass the action off to dispatch. All right, so before store.dispatch, I'm going to say const action is, let's try to create a policy. So I'll say create policy. And remember, anytime that we call the create policy action creator, right here, we have to pass in a name and an amount to pay to the company to get a policy. So as the first argument, I'll pass in a name of Alex and an amount of money of 20. So now if I wanted to, I could do a console log of action, and I should see the action object. There it is right there. I've got my type and my payload. So I'm going to take that action and pass it to store.dispatch. And now it looks like nothing at all happened. But we can actually use another method on the store object to get a better idea of how we just changed all the data inside of our application. Remember, when we take store.dispatch and pass it the action, that action will be forwarded off to each reducer. And so as soon as we called store.dispatch, each of our different reducer functions, or departments essentially, ran and processed that action or that form. So now, if I do a store.getState, getState is a function that's going to essentially get our entire assembled repository of data for our company. Just as we said before, we're going to have this kind of central repository. So when we call getState, we get access to that big, gigantic glob of information. Now, I'm going to need to make sure that I actually do a console log, because that is just a plain object. That's better. All right, so after it runs, we're going to see the state of our application print out. So you'll see that we've got keys here of accounting, so that's how much money we have in our company. And then we've got policies, which is the array that has the name of everyone who has signed up for a policy with our company. And that's pretty much it. So now we can call all of our different action creators, pass the action that gets returned to store.dispatch, and that's going to incrementally modify exactly how the state of our company looks. That is all contained inside of this store. Let's try doing a couple of quick examples here. I'm going to refactor the store.dispatch and instead just pass the result of calling create policy directly to it. So I'm going to put create policy in here, and I'll enter in Alex and 20. And now I do not need to create the action ahead of time. Okay, so that's going to create a new policy for Alex. I'll now try to create a new policy for Jim, and let's say Jim has to pay $30. And maybe, how about, I don't know, we'll say Bob has to pay $40. So we've now created 3 policies, and we've paid in a total of 20, 30, and 40 to our company. So 20 plus 30 plus 40 plus the default of 100 that our company initially had is 190. So we see the results over here. We have accounting of 190, and then we have policies created for Alex, Jim, and Bob. Now, if we wanted to, we could have one of our different people try to create a claim. So I could say store.dispatch, create claim, and we'll say that Alex wants to create a claim for, how about $120. So now when we do our get state, we'll see that we've now deducted $120 from our company, so we're now down to $70. Alex still has a policy as he did before, and now we can see that we also have a claim history object here to reflect the fact that Alex just tried to withdraw $100. The number is right there, or $120, excuse me. And the name of the person who withdrew that was Alex. So now we can say that maybe Jim gets in a accident as well. So we could do a store.dispatch, create claim for Jim. And maybe Jim's accident wasn't so bad. So he only needs, how about $50? And so now we'll notice that we have $50 less than we had before. And we now have 2 different claims inside there. And then finally, let's test out the last action. We'll do our last action creator, which was delete policy. So I'll do a delete policy and pass in Bob, because Bob realized he never made a claim and he doesn't really need any insurance at all. And so now, when we see the result of our console log, we see that only Alex and Jim now have a policy. And we still have all the same claim history and accounting stuff that we had before. Okay, so that's it. That is Redux in action. Now let's take a pause right here. When we come back to the next video, I'm going to point out some very distinct things that I want you to notice about the code that we just wrote right here. And this is going to help you understand why we use Redux inside of React application and why it's so widely used in industry. So quick pause and I'll see you in just a minute.